Can I make an announcement before the Q&A?
Yes.
So Judy, you were saying you have how many episodes of Living La Vida Low Carb? 1,500 or so? So some of you came up to me today, you read my blog, you watch my videos, you've heard me on podcasts. I've been on a lot of podcasts. The very first podcast I ever did was Living La Vida Low Carb. Jimmy Moore had me on his show when nobody knew who Amy Berger was, if anyone knows who she is now, but I had this rinky-dink little PDF book about Alzheimer's disease for sale, and Jimmy kind of knew who I was, but anyway, Jimmy, with a heart of gold, had me on his show before anybody knew anything. When this book didn't even exist as it looks now, it was just a little PDF, and so thank you, Jimmy, for being the first one to introduce me to the world. Questions?
Question time. It's going to be a lot of questions.
Okay, my name is Karen, and thank you all for coming. This has been wonderful. I have a question for you, though. I have thyroid issues, have since I was 13, and I also have adrenal fatigue that has been diagnosed. I am on supplements for that, but when I started keto in November, everything seemed to be fine, but as of January, I started noticing my hair falling out more. So I know without taking tests and things like that, you can't diagnose, but I'm just wondering if there are some things that I need to be taking in addition to what, the keto diet, if there's something else I need to be taking to help with that.
I'll take a stab. So I've been asked to repeat the question because the video can't hear. So the question was asked from a person who has thyroid disease and adrenal fatigue, and after starting keto, experienced some hair loss. When you lose weight successfully, this is one time that I will check T3. I don't shoot a big lab panel for people often, but when you do lose weight, sometimes your body goes through a metabolic adaptation, and I will look at things. The other thing is that when you have any kind of stressor, and even a good stressor, your body has to adjust. And sometimes there is something called telogen effluvium, which just means temporary hair loss. Women commonly experience it after a pregnancy. Also after bariatric surgery or illness. And so sometimes there is something wrong that needs to be corrected, but oftentimes it just resolves on its own if you give it a little time.
Yeah, telogen, write this down. T-E-L-O-G-E-N, telogen, effluvium, E-F-F-L-U-V-I-U-M. The new hairs are coming in, pushing out the bad hairs. Problem is it takes a little while for the new hairs to come in. I don't know of any, so I do know a lot of people who say do this, do this, do this. Never seen a study on whether these things help, and usually it's just reassurance.
There is actually a blog post that Dr. Michael Eads wrote many years ago when this issue came up pretty habitually. This is many years ago, but look up Dr. Michael Eads and hair loss, because he talks about how when you go low carb, you have such metabolic and hormonal changes take place that it may fall out, but then the new hair starts to grow in stronger. And one other thing that he mentioned in that article that I remember was make sure that you're not eating in a hypocaloric state, because if you're not eating enough calories, that also will lead, I'm assuming it's hormonally related, that the hair would release. So be sure you're having adequate calories when you're eating keto.
I would add to that adequate protein. That is an important thing.
Hair is protein.
Hair is protein. All right, next question.
Thank you so much for being here today. This is my birthday gift to me. That's how important I thought it was. Would you please address, I am intermittent fasting, 16/8, been doing it for a month now. dropped 17.2 pounds. But my question is, we've heard this in the past because, you know, I'll be 68 tomorrow, and this is old mentality, but maybe it's not. When you lower your intake of food, then your body gets used to it, goes into that starvation mode. Is there anything to that? Do I need to be worried? Because I am down to 2 meals a day.
Well, I would imagine, so for the recording audience, the question is, if a person goes on intermittent fasting, 16-8, loses weight successfully, will your body go into starvation mode if you're not getting enough calories? And so I imagine that of the 5 of us here, we have 5 different opinions about that. So scientifically, there's somewhat of a divide about intermittent fasting. Some are great believers, others are skeptics and worry about old starvation studies showing protein and muscle mass loss. I kind of come out kind of like this. This is something I will purposely do, but more often it just happens by accident. Because I eat when I'm hungry, I drink when I'm thirsty. We do know that I really think that the whole starvation mode to me is kind of a myth or a misstatement. I do want you to get adequate protein, fatty meats, and greens, and if you miss a meal every now and then, and it works for you, but it doesn't matter what you do, eventually your body will do what is called metabolic adaptation. So it will try to help you maintain a weight, so you'll plateau. And plateaus are not inevitable or long-lasting, but they're common. Okay, so a lot of people try intermittent fasting, and
Yeah, that was a great response. So to me, eat when you're hungry means intermittent fasting is fine as long as you're not ignoring your hunger. And then you're eating really healthy foods.
Yes.
Keto foods are great. The weight loss, so I typically see 1 pound or 2 per week. And meaning, 10, 20 pounds a month is kind of fast. You want it to go slowly so you can repair your body as best you can. Introducing just time-delimited eating may reduce your caloric intake to a level that maybe more than what I see just by having people eat, like by accident you eat twice a day or something. So that's interesting. I don't normally see people lose weight that fast. Adaptation, so now, with any study, yes, I do wait for studies, Jimmy. The first one that comes out, you go, oh, that's interesting. The hallmark of science is replication. So you wait till the second study comes out. Remember the cold fusion? Anyway, you can lie. Actually, there are studies that are put out that are false, and then no one can replicate it, and then they finally find out that they fabricated the whole data set. David Ludwig at Harvard has done 2 studies now, so we can believe it, where your body's going to lower its metabolism when you lose weight. It's going to. It's trying to have you hold on to the energy because you might need to run again away from the saber-toothed tiger, so it's a metabolic adaptation. But your metabolic rate goes down less on a low-carb diet compared to a high-carb diet when you're losing weight. So the starvation mode is one of these all or nothing, blah, blah. You can't get your starvation metabolism down to 0. You would be dead, right? So, and then metabolic rate usually is 800 or 1,000 calories per day. Although I've met, the older you are, the slower your metabolism goes. The more sedentary you are, the slower it is. I met an individual whose metabolic rate was 500 a day. That's really which means you have to eat less than that to lose weight. So there's a lot of individual variability. And this starvation mode it's the food pushers wanting you to eat food again, I think.
So I'm currently over 20 hours of fasting. Do I look like I'm starving? Do I look like I'm not lucid or have energy You guys saw me do a talk a while ago. I was like 17 hours into a fast at that point. I think it's such a misnotion that because we're not putting food energy into our mouth, that we're not eating. Every single one of you is eating right now, whether you realize it or not, especially if you're keto. Because your body fat becomes the food. And I think we forget about that with the obsession about the macronutrients, that you're eating even when you're not eating. And I've done 3 21-day fasts. You want to talk about starvation mode, I should be incredibly hungry doing those. But I was completely fine. Wouldn't recommend it, by the way. Don't do 21 days. If you're going to fast for a few days, go 3 to 5 days, see how you do and reassess. And probably not for more than 7. But all of this like negative stigma about eating being in starvation mode, I agree with you. I think it's a lot of the food manufacturers. They're like, shh, don't tell them they can't eat because then they'll stop buying our products.
Thank you so much.
Good evening, or good afternoon. I'm coming up on a year of having stents put in. My LAD was 98%. I dodged the bullet, but I've gone on the keto, I guess in January, because I kept gaining weight, even though I was only eating practically salads for a whole year of vegetables, and I kept gaining weight. And I got, oh, you need to cut out more calories, or you're not eating enough, and all that kind of stuff. Now I'm on a keto, I'm eating everything I wasn't supposed to eat in my entire lifetime and never did eat. And I'm worried about my heart and the cholesterol and the buildup and everything. And I just wonder if this is going to impact my coronary arteries. You know, am I going to have stents again?
You first.
All right, so the question is, a patient has had stents in the left anterior descending artery and went from a vegetarian, mainly salad-based diet, was gaining weight, went keto, and now she eats all the foods her cardiologist and dietitian told her not to eat, and what will happen to her heart? Now, the obvious answer is nobody here is a history or can predict the future. But here's what we see over and over and over. We've got studies now, I think 23 studies that look at keto versus low-fat diet for A1C, HDL, triglycerides, and blood pressure. And the overwhelming winner is low carb. All right? They got on the LDL train for 50 years. Your triglycerides and HDL are more important in terms of cardiovascular mortality. Low keto will lower inflammation, which is a big driver for coronary artery disease. All right? So I told in my talk that my triglycerides were 256 and my HDL 27. And the longer you do this, the better it gets. Now my triglycerides are 49 and my HDL's 90. You know, I'm not worried about the LDL. And I also want to thank the people who gave those stories, because I also, I was at one point a 294-pound doctor trying to take care of people. And so I really identified with the shame and everything.
It wasn't until the fellow to my right, Jimmy Moore, asked me to help him with a book called Cholesterol Clarity that I really understood that it was inflammation and not the LDL cholesterol that causes heart disease. Now, I would guarantee most of your doctors have not read Cholesterol Clarity. Although some of my patients give it to their doctors to teach them. Let me rephrase it. 20 years ago, there were 2 competing theories about atherosclerosis. The Jerry Reven metabolic syndrome, syndrome X, hyperinsulinemia. And it got suppressed by the LDL being discovered and the receptor being cloned and all of these drugs coming out to lower a LDL number. They still are competing hypotheses. And as Dr. McDaniel said, the LDL lowering has not eradicated heart disease. So they're talking about the remainder risk. And really all along, this was a competing hypothesis, meaning we think it's the triglyceride, the HDL, the abdominal circumference, the glucose, that's the cause of your cholesterol and arterial narrowing in the heart, not the LDL, even though we were all taught that. And it becomes now like we're dealing with emotional ties to something with diseases that are very serious, and doctors are using emotion in the wrong way, telling you you have to be on this drug or you'll die. When this is a risk factor, it's not the blood sugar is 1,000, if you don't get it treated now, you will die. The LDL is 250, if you don't go on a statin, well, maybe in 10 years from now, you'll get a heart attack. I mean, it's a risk factor if it was true. So that's one beef that I have, is that doctors aren't using language correctly. They're trying to use persuasion and arm twisting, and it leads into just the wrong understanding of what causes the disease in the first place. But check out Cholesterol Clarity, and I don't think it sells as well as Keto Clarity.
No, Keto Clarity without the water.
So interesting. So Cholesterol Clarity, while scientifically probably is more solid, you just interview.
We know more about cholesterol than we do keto.
Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting that it didn't sell real well because people don't want to hear it, or we're still stuck in the LDL cholesterol paradigm, is another way to say it.
So one thing you said that stuck out to me was you were worried about all of this fat and cholesterol you're eating on your keto diet clogging your arteries. So there's this notion that because when they open people up and they look inside the arteries, it's this yellow waxy substance, that it must be the dietary cholesterol and dietary fat that you're eating. Who believes that or has believed that? Yeah, a lot of us did. And so it's actually the carbohydrate. And so when that carbohydrate inflames the body, and we get back to this inflammation that Dr. McDaniel was talking about, that is a key marker. So I don't know if you're tracking like HSCRP or IGF-1 or homocysteine or any of these kind of inflammatory markers, or if you're just merely, are you still taking a statin medication as well?
I was still taking a statin, but I was never a bread eater, I was never a sweet eater, I was never a pasta or potato eater. I mean,
Right.
I never did carbs a bunch.
Right, so
So,
there's no, if you never did those before, then what are you doing now that's different than you did before?
I'm eating a lot of fat.
So you've added in more
Protein.
fat.
Protein.
Okay. Well, then if you're concerned about it, I agree with some of the panelists that talked about put the focus on the protein first and foremost, and use the fat as a flavoring agent to get satiety. Then you take away, any concerns. You got a heart attack for a reason. And so at that point, kind of go back in your mind, what led to that? Was it fat? What was it? And so for most people, it tends to be a refined carbohydrate type of diet. But for the grace of God, I never got a heart attack. And I didn't tell you guys, I have a family history. I can't breathe. I have a family history of heart disease. I lost both of my grandfathers in their early 50s. My dad had a heart attack at 48, another one at 50, and quintuple heart bypass at 54. He's 69 today, and he is not well. I had a brother that had 3 heart attacks at the age of 32, and he died at 41. I'm 47. I'm supposed to be dying of heart disease, but I ain't. Because you can buck the trend of genetics. It's not inevitable just because you've had a cardiovascular event that you're going to have another one. You're doing the right things, and I don't see there being any harm in eating a real foods-based diet that keeps inflammation lower.
It was in Cholesterol Clarity that if you want to know if you have heart disease, so broadening the question to do I have heart disease, it's not found by looking at a blood test. It's found by measuring the disease itself. And actually you can get measurements of the carotid, the neck artery, the aorta, the abdominal artery, but these companies come into churches like this in the dead of night, and they only charge you $150, and it's a disruptive technology, because if you went to me, we'd have to charge you $1,000 or $1,500 for it. So there are these legitimate ultrasound companies that will come by and check your arteries for you. Lifeline is one of the companies in our area in North Carolina. And then you're gonna get it done here in Georgia. And the coronary artery calcium score is interesting. And Ivor Cummins, of course, and Jeff Berger wrote a book called Eat Rich, Live Long, and they outline the use of the coronary artery calcium score. It's not, it has a more, it's not as clear as just getting the arteries directly measured.
That run a CT heart scan.
Has anyone had a CT heart scan run, coronary artery calcium score?
Get 0.
93.
So 0 is yeah, great. Well, and so you got it in this area in Georgia?
Yeah, John's Creek has a
Lifeline runs that.
women's facility that'll do a CT, a cardiac scan for $150. I came down from Asheville where I lived and had it done here for $150 at John's Creek Women's Center.
Johns Creek?
It's a hospital, right?
Johns Creek Hospital will,
around the Lifeline is around there.
and Lifeline will do the coronary artery calcium scores and the ultrasounds on this area.
So the calcium score is something I had when I was 40, it was 0. I have seen patients who would request it serially, which I think is really problematic, because if you have calcium score, the idea is you then have some heart disease, and the score roughly relates how bad it is. But some of the studies have shown that in people who are actually getting healthier, sometimes the calcium score continues to go up. So I think that how you interpret it is kind of problematic. But if you just wanted to know if there's any concern or not, the ultrasound doesn't require any radiation. And so I think, going from look at LDL to say this is a very prevalent disease when we're talking about vascular disease, carotid, stomach, heart arteries, brain arteries, it's all the same thing. Look at it economically and with the least amount of radiation as possible. Now the other thing is that inflammation keeps coming back up. One of the things that I've learned is, guess what the source of most inflammation is? It's carbohydrate, but the inflammatory markers, many of them are actually coming from the fat cell. So one of the things that obesity is not just being too heavy, it's having too much body fat. And that body fat, one of its effects is it messes up your metabolic rate and your inflammatory system. And so in that way, it will promote heart disease.
I was just going to say really quickly, Jimmy used to have really high cholesterol. It's still a little elevated, but his was on, I think it was actually 401 or something like that. And we went to Australia, heard this dentist talk about, your dental health and cholesterol. Well, we came back to the States and Jimmy had some mercury amalgams taken out. He had root canals that had gotten infected. He had those taken care of. After he had that taken care of, his cholesterol dropped 100 points just from taking care of that stuff. So the cholesterol is in your body for a reason. It's giving you an indicator that there's inflammation somewhere. So you don't, and it's frustrating because when you're opened up and they see that stuff in there, there's a reason for it. The processed carbohydrates, the sugar is what causes the inflammation in the arteries. The cholesterol goes to the site of the inflammation and deals with it, tries to heal it. There's another reason why that may happen. If you are deficient, you may be taking a calcium supplement, but you're deficient in D and K2. K2 and D are what tells calcium, it tells it where to go in the body. So if you're deficient in D and K2, it's possible to have osteoporosis, but yet at the same time have calcium buildup in your arteries or bone spurs or that sort of thing. So I would look at your vitamin D levels and your K2 as well.
I mean, they've been mentioning inflammation, but you'll hear a lot, inflammation is the root of all disease, and are you sick because you're inflamed, or are you inflamed because you're sick? And there's nothing more, so the atherosclerotic process is a repair process to a blood vessel that has been damaged. The single most damaging thing to blood vessels that I know of, and I'm not a physician, but the single most damaging thing to blood vessels that I know of is chronically high blood sugar and insulin. So you control that. You don't have to repair arteries that aren't damaged. So can insulin cause it? Probably. I can't say for sure.
So one of the things that you have a problem with in medicine is this all or none binary thinking, where all disease is caused by LDL, all of it's caused by inflammation, or all of it's caused by insulin. You know, coronary artery disease is a multifactorial thing. Obesity and diabetes are multifactorial. There are lots of things. There's genetic factors, environmental factors, blood pressure. So blood pressure creates some shear force on the inner lining of your artery, and you get these little damaged areas, and that's where the cholesterol penetrates and tries to heal it. And so these are complicated diseases. The keto diet, in my opinion, is the best way from a nutritional perspective to address these issues.
Can I say one more thing? I want to say one more thing about the CT heart scan that you mentioned, the new cholesterol guidelines. Who knew there was such a thing as cholesterol guidelines? Yeah, a lot of us don't. And so it's what doctors use for standard of care about how you as the patient are treated. So traditionally, if you have an LDL cholesterol over 100 or a total cholesterol over 200, they're supposed to go crazy in their mind and scare you half to death of having a heart attack. And so they put you on a statin. Well, now the new standard of care, and I want you to ask your doctor about this. If he tries to pull this, you need to be on a statin. The new standard of care says we're going to add one additional step before the statin medication is prescribed. We want you to go get a CT heart scan. So they're now putting that in the guidelines. So if you come back with a 237 total cholesterol, which means absolutely nothing, it's like telling me the end of a baseball game is 30. You don't know if it was a 29-1 blowout. You don't know if it was a 16-14 burn. You don't know what it means. It's just a total number of a whole bunch of things. So if it comes back 237 and they say, oh, statin, you know, the new guidelines, the new cholesterol guidelines, you don't have to be ugly about it, but the new cholesterol guidelines say, I need to get a CT heart scan. Let's do that. And if they don't know what you're talking about, you really need to change doctor.
One more question, and we're back here in the back.
Hi, my name is Monica Serna. Thank you for coming out to the different cities in the country to spread your message. However, in seeing the community here, I see that there's part of our larger community that is not represented. It's our youngsters. How do you propose, or how do you advise all of us who have a different influence in our kids, grandkids, or friends, and teaching or directing them into this lifestyle, and also how to cope with social pressure at school and with friends and not giving up on carbs with friends and outings.
Well, I think if you're talking about a child or a teenager who is healthy and you just want to keep them healthy, please don't kick me out of the room, but a super, super strict ketogenic diet is not required for everybody to stay healthy or to be healthy. If you're already healthy and you want to stay healthy, I don't recommend eating like 200 grams of carbs a day, but you don't have to eat 20. You know, if you as the parent you have total control over the food that's purchased. You have total control over what goes in the grocery cart. They can cry their heads. I don't have children, so it's very easy for me to say, but they can just cry their little heads off, and it's too bad we ain't buying X, Y, and Z. If you do that, if what they get the vast majority of the time at home is the good quality, real, low-ish carb foods, then every now and then, when they have the cupcake at the birthday party or they have the slice of pizza, I don't think it's that big a deal. If you're talking about a child that already has type 2 diabetes or already is obese, I mean, it's the sad state of affairs in this country that we have toddlers who are obese. We have toddlers that have type 2 diabetes. In that situation, you probably do want to keep them keto, and that's just a matter of going the extra mile, not just having the food in your home be only appropriate choices so that they don't have the option to eat something else. It's not in the house. You are also going to have to pack the lunches. And then you still are going to deal with those situations where they're at a friend's house or something. All you can do is educate and guide them. And again, the every now and then little thing probably isn't going to be that big a deal. It's a question of if you're dealing with a child that already has some type of metabolic illness, how much and how often can they have that stuff before it really becomes a bigger problem? I don't know.
I know with my family, it's, and Jimmy observed this too, every time we would go to Indiana, my dad's family is from Indiana, and they would watch us, and they're Italian on top of that, so I mean, it's just, they love to eat, they love to cook. So, and the pressure was there for us to eat, and we would say, no, we're not hungry, and oh, you must be hungry, it's lunchtime, they eat by the clock, and so, we will admit it was very hard for us to not eat, we feel like we weren't being sociable, but you live by example. And family, as I mentioned earlier, it's that powdered butt syndrome that Ken Berry talks about. Your family is going to be the last people to listen to you because of your family. But slowly we've seen certain circumstances in my family where my cousin had a heart attack, I think it was 38. He had a heart attack. My dad diagnosed with cancer in 2015. Several family members dying of cancer and other, diabetes and that sort of thing. So I think sometimes you don't want to see this, but it takes them getting to that point in their life where nothing else works, but they've watched you do your thing and not pushing it down their throat, not ramming it down their throat, and you live by example, and sometimes that's what it takes.
Before I forget, because I will forget. I think you left off at a really good point that I wanted to pick up is, the family pressure and the social pressure. In terms of the social pressure, I've never, ever been to a restaurant where there was nothing I could order. You might have to ask for a substitution, you might have to customize, but there's never been a time when there was literally nothing that I could eat.
Don't get donuts.
Well, you can get some coffee, but the thing is, it is much, much harder with family. Much harder with family, and hard with friends sometimes too, but here's the thing, and this might be unpopular, but this is the truth. I don't understand why grown adults are so concerned with what other grown adults put in their mouth. You don't have to defend yourself, you don't have to justify it, you don't owe anybody an explanation. You don't ask how they vote, you don't ask what they do in the bedroom. Leave me alone with what's on my plate, it's none of your business. But the way to do this is to be diplomatic about it. Don't be that person like, oh, I can't have that, oh, that's not keto, how many carbs are in that? Nobody cares. That is the fastest way. Being that person, being that condescending, snarky keto zealot is the fastest way to turn people off. If you want to bring them along, serve as the example. Get off your diabetes medication, lose 20 pounds, clear up your skin, be in the best health you've ever been, and radiate it so that they will beg you to tell them what you're doing. You won't have to force them, they will ask you.
Yep.
So I've practiced family medicine for 28 years, and that includes kids. And it is a real shame what is going on with school lunches.
Amen.
And I think Ledwick has a program for pushing Whole Foods into the lunchroom. So does everybody need to be keto? Probably not. Could it be healthy for you? I think so. That's where we're going. With kids, you have to pick your battles. Get rid of any sugar-sweetened beverage or juice. That needs to be number one, in my opinion. I think our time is out. So. Okay, well, I got a little more. So, but get active in your community. Do this grassroots. Pay attention to what your kid eats. If you have an option to get rid of the crap food and vending machines at the school, try to do that. I mean, we have an obesity crisis, and we're not going to chase it by only treating adults. We need people who advocate for the children, and it's time to get, active about changing dietary guidelines.
Yes, come on.
Yeah, that's Nutrition Coalition that are changing the guidelines from the top. Although I'm very envious of this vending machine I saw a picture of at Ohio State. It was a bacon vending machine. And we do have pork rinds in the vending machine in our area only because we lobbied the guy pushing the stuff in the machine. So it's not like a top-down Duke-wide thing. But the Duke pediatric program for obesity uses a low-carb approach. And they did have a keto project for a while. And a lot of children will gravitate toward the steak, the bacon, the stuff you send to school if they feel better. And so a lot of these kids are not feeling great. And if you get them in the summer, you get them on feeling better. Do it when you have time to have total control of the food is one strategy. And we have bacon on our side.
There is a fantastic documentary on Netflix, if you've not seen it, called The Magic Pill. Who's seen that in here? So for the rest of you that haven't seen it, both of you, there is a great story in there about this little girl that had some incredible behavioral issues. If you want to know the power of nutrition on kids, watch that film, because that girl made a complete turnaround. Now, she pitched a fifth first day, but she made a complete turnaround in her mental health. And it makes me wonder, why do we feed kids in such a way that they can't learn well with the public schools? Why don't we feed them bacon and eggs? And how about they all become the smartest kids in the entire world?
Great, thank you. Yeah, drop the mic. That concludes the session.
Yes, thank you so much.